Good evening to all of you, and thank you for joining us on 13 Plus tonight. I'm Mary Coleman. As Netflix releases Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story, the tragic history of Eric and Lyle Menendez is brought back into the spotlight. Now, the series revisits the brothers' traumatic upbringing, chronicling the harrowing abuse they endured at the hands of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez. Despite overwhelming evidence of prolonged sexual and emotional abuse, their trauma was largely disregarded during their trial, and their self-defense narrative was ignored by many. Tonight, we have a one-on-one with Duigu Balin, a licensed psychotherapist specializing in familial trauma and attachment wounding. She talks with us about the impacts of abuse on male survivors.
So let's talk a little bit about male trauma. Obviously, it's a very hot topic right now with the Menendez brothers back in the spotlight and everything that's going on, especially considering the ruling from Friday. Talk with us a little bit about the impact of trauma on the decision making. Again, it's something that's been brought back into the spotlight with everything going on. And I think with social media, a lot of people are really seeing their side of things now, as opposed to, just them being found guilty of this crime.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thank you so much for giving space to such an important topic. I think it's really important to raise awareness and to talk about these things, even though they're very disturbing and uncomfortable. And I think it's about, when we think about victimhood and when we think about male victimhood, oftentimes the experience of sexual abuse trauma is so much associated with the female experience with women. And if we think about like how many women we know who have to some degree experienced either sexual harassment or sexual abuse, we all can think of someone, because women have in some ways permission to talk about these things, but also they have the words for it, they have labels for it. Whereas for men, oftentimes they're associated with being predators. So we don't really, as a society, see that they can be victims. And this is very problematic, of course. It makes it very hard for them to disclose, and they don't even have the words for it. And what is seen as sexual abuse for women is not always seen as sexual abuse for men. And men, the feeling that they are allowed to have is aggression, and they're really not allowed to express any other feelings in our society. And these gender codes are just very harmful. And at the end of the day, what ends up happening is they either turn towards themselves and it becomes self-destructive coping mechanisms, or they retaliate in violent ways. And when they do, and we dismiss and disregard the abuse, then in many ways we're re-victimizing them and we are absolving the abusers.
And you touched on it a little bit already, but why do you think that male sexual assault is so underreported in comparison to women? And I suppose, how has that become taboo for a lot of men?
For many men, actually, it is very shameful. They experience this intense shame. So that really prevents them from disclosing. They're very worried that they're going to be perceived as less than a man for not being able to fight their predators. They're worried that their manhood, their sexual orientation is going to be questioned. They're worried that their partners are not going to see them the same way. And they're also worried that their peers are going to humiliate them and mock them and make fun of them. And just the fact that they aren't able to stand up against it, that is really causing a lot of shame that they just can't disclose and can't report it.
And going back to the Menendez brothers specifically, it's been pretty clear from a lot of people that, oh, well, why didn't you bring it up sooner that you were abused? Why did it take so long? Or I guess, why wasn't, that said right off the bat for a lot of people? This is something that people became critical of right away. So is this common among victims, not coming out right away and saying this happened to me, and having to kind of internalize it for a while?
Yes, and yeah, definitely. And I think, it's important to think about when we think about childhood abuse, it's very different than abuse that happens later on in life. Childhood abuse, many children don't really have other experiences to compare it with. And evolutionarily, children are wired to love their parents, and they try really hard to love their parents, even if it's difficult to love them and even if they hurt them. And there's also a lot of dysfunctional beliefs. So children oftentimes are told that they are deserving of what's happening to them, right? Like they are told, don't make me take out my belt, or you're acting this way and that's why I'm punishing you. Or they are told, if you tell anyone, really bad things are going to happen to this family and you're going to be blamed for it. And of course, children believe this because children believe their parents. And because abuse happens in isolation and because abuse happens in such secrecy, oftentimes children don't really have other adults to rely on. So they are really left at the mercy of their caregivers. And a lot of these dysfunctional beliefs become internalized and become how they see themselves, because it's such a critical time of identity formation that they just really believe that they're not worth loving, that no one will come to their rescue, that no one cares. So it becomes very, very difficult for children to disclose. And also, we as a society really do dismiss children. We really don't believe them. We really do think that they're exaggerating. So, and we're all so consumed with our day-to-day lives, and we're all stretched so thin that we don't recognize a lot of the cues. So children really don't feel like they have adults that they can trust. And actually, research indicates that when children do disclose, they usually disclose to a peer rather than an adult, which says so much about the society that we're living in.
Absolutely. And what are some of the long-term psychological effects of abuse, be it with relationships or just navigating through life in general?
I mean, thank you for asking that, because that's a very important subject. I mean, the impact of trauma is tremendous. It affects the person's sense of self-worth, and it affects how someone relates to themselves, relates to other people, and relates to the world around them. Actually, children make the decision whether the world is a safe place to live in, or whether other people are trustworthy when they're, in their formation. So when they grow up in families where their needs aren't met, or the people who are supposed to love and protect them hurt them, then the understanding is the world is not safe. I can't trust anyone. I'm not worth loving. And they move through the world with these belief systems, of course, and that's very, very damaging and very hurtful. And it's also important to remember that hurt people end up hurting other people. So that's why conversations like this and awareness around childhood trauma is tremendously important.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads to my next question, the importance of mental health resources and just being a shoulder for these people to cry on or lean on when they need to talk about this. How important is that?
I'm really glad you bring this up, because actually a lot of times we don't know how to respond to somebody who makes such a disclosure. And I'm a trauma therapist. And as a trauma therapist, it took me a really long time to actually understand that I don't really have to come up with a genius offering or be an antidote to someone, or find solutions to their problems, because in reality there really isn't anything to say. When someone discloses childhood abuse, I think we get so uncomfortable and we want to soothe them and we want to solve their problems, but that's really not what people are looking for. Oftentimes all that's necessary is just to be there, just to witness, just to give space, because we have to remember that abuse oftentimes is the notion is I have to suffer alone, I'm by myself, no one cares, no one is going to come to my rescue. So to change those narratives, for other people to be there, for other people to care, and just to be able to listen, that is something that's really important. And it's not easy to do. We all have to learn how to do this, and we learn how to do this the same way we learn how to do anything, by practicing, by researching, by paying attention, by being mindful, by talking about this in mainstream media, in and the news and reading novels and watching movies about this. This is how we learn how to do it.
Very well said. And Joybu, I don't know if you're able to, but I was kind of curious what your thoughts are on everything that's going on with the Menendez brothers and just how things have changed so quickly, it seems. And I truly credit social media for a lot of this and a lot of people pushing a little bit harder for a better understanding of what it is that they went through. What are your thoughts on all of that?
I mean, I think that it's very important that they brought that the series about them just brought so much more conversation around this very, very important topic. And I just think that we all as a society we have to talk about male victimhood. We have to talk about childhood abuse. We can't, because if we're not, we're just abandoning our children. And the one thing that I know, I of course I'm not their therapist, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say anything specifically about the case. But one thing that I can say is for something to so horrendous to have happened, there has to be a series of preceding horrendous events. Because as I mentioned before, I mean, children are just designed to love their parents, and we can't not talk about what led to something so terrible. And now I think it's changing a little bit. We're not completely there. I think there's a long ways to go. But now that there's a lot more awareness around male sexual abuse, a lot more awareness about the impact of trauma, that I think just having these conversations are very, very important. And as we're speaking today, there's many children who are still waiting to be saved. This is still continuing today, and some of these children are girls, and some of these children are boys, and some of these children are other. And it's just, they are children, and all children need adults to love and protect them.
Absolutely, absolutely. You would think that goes without saying, unfortunately. Dwaygo, is there anything else that you would like to add that you think is important to include that we haven't talked about yet?
Another topic that I think that the Menendez story brings to light is our understanding of who is usually abused, which children are usually abused, because as a society, we really admire people who are wealthy, who have social status and power. And I think this story also sheds light to the fact that this can happen in anywhere, right? In any side of the train tracks, to anyone, any background. So it's very important to not make any assumptions to who it can happen to. And also that, it doesn't really matter what kind of, if somebody's living in a mansion or somebody's driving fancy cars, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that, as I said before, that children are children, and if their parents aren't equipped to protect them, then as a society, we have to protect them, regardless of the conditions of their or social status or anything, gender, ethnicity.
And we are so grateful for Duigu offering her expertise on the topic. Very important stuff here. For now, we will leave you with a live look from our Mount Bigelow camera. That moon is looking gorgeous out there. We hope you are staying warm because it's a bit chilly out there. And we hope you'll join us for more news and weather on 13 News Live at 10. Have a great evening.